This week, two campaigns come to a head and the Confederacy eats itself alive. First thing this week on the 27th is the end of a nothing campaign, the Steele's Bayou Expedition. You'll be able to figure out why I bring it up now. It ends with General Sherman marching up and then back down the bayou, unwilling to advance against a defended Confederate position, with rebel reinforcements marching ahead of him unexpectedly. The campaign came to a close with nothing notable about it, not even a battle. The same day, Confederate President Jefferson Davis calls for a day of prayer and fasting to be given.
It is meet that, as people who acknowledge the supremacy of the living God, and that by prayer alone can we hope to receive the continued manifestation of that protecting care which has hitherto shielded us in the midst of trials and dangers. Under these circumstances, it is my privilege to invite you once more to meet together and prostrate yourselves in humble supplication to Him who has been our constant and never-failing support in the past, and to whose protection and guidance we trust for the future. To this end, I, Jefferson Davis, President of the Confederate States of America, do issue this, my proclamation, setting apart Friday, the 27th day of March, as a day of fasting, humiliation, and prayer.
On the 30th, we move to the second campaign, the North Carolina campaign. North Carolina hasn't been the site of action since early 1862 with the North Carolina expedition. General Ambrose Burnside, he saw success from New Bern to Fort Macon, the northern tip. These gains were solidified under Burnside's replacement on the coast of the Carolina, General Foster. They weren't exploited, though. It's been a long time since the eyes of the war were on the Tar Heel state, but as things have grown calm further north in Virginia, it was seen fit to send Lieutenant General James Longstreet, Lee's old warhorse, to the state with a huge portion of the army, numbering over 25,000 men. On the 30th of January, they fought a nothing battle, where a brigade under Confederate Brigadier General Roger.E.Lee fought around the deserted house near Suffolk against 8,000 Union cavalry. He inflicted more casualties, 142, to the 39 he took, but yielded the ground. Major General Daniel H. Hill of the Confederacy fought from the 13th to the 15th at New Bern, but was unable to take the strategic area. It's important to note that Hill is in a separate column from Longstreet, because after his failure at New Bern, he marches to Washington, North Carolina, without any realistic hope for reinforcement. Hill has 9,000 men with his division. In Washington is General Foster with the garrison in 18th Corps. Foster outnumbers Hill with 12,000 men, but these aren't as experienced as the battle-hardened veterans under the Confederate commander. But Foster does have another thing going for him: defense. He's a West Point graduate who studied engineering. He digs in, earthworks get thrown up, and on the 30th, the brigade of General Richard Garnett, a divisional commander of the Confederacy, starts digging in parallel to Foster. The siege has begun. The Confederates quickly move to cut off Washington from the outside. The Tar River is littered with obstructions, and artillery is moved into place. 2 brigades are placed in between New Bern and Washington, and Hill starts forming foraging parties. He wants a long siege. He's actually under orders to not assault, which makes sense. He is outnumbered. But Foster doesn't have the strength to dislodge him. Nonetheless, a message is sent to Foster formally asking for surrender. If the Confederates want Washington, come and get it. Nice reference to the Spartans, Foster. Cannons open up and are replied to by counter-battery fire. But this is the coast in the spring. Rainfall dampens powder, and the defenses that are being bombarded turn to mud. And disease arrives in both camps. It's grueling warfare, and it will continue into next week. Which brings us to the final action of this week. On the 27th, CSA President Jefferson Davis called for a day of fasting. Even for those who weren't thankful, it was. Bread prices have skyrocketed in the seceded states. And as the Union blockade tightens, Scott's anaconda squeezes the life out of the Confederate civilians. The value of products in Richmond are 7 to 8 times as high as they were in 1861. In Inflation is out of control at a nearly 40% rate. There are 3 times as many people in Richmond as before. The salt for meat is gone with Louisiana, where the salt mines were located. Crop failures are starving the people, and the army has what little food there is. Food riots are nothing new for the Confederacy. They have happened in North Carolina and Georgia, but Richmond has been relatively safe until one woman got fed up. Mary Jackson. As I said, there is precedent, not legal obviously, for her actions. In March and April of this year, women have used clubs and guns to take vague promises from the government as moral protection and risen up. Mary Jackson is 34 years of age. She is middle to working class and has 3 children, 1 in the Confederate Army. And for weeks, she has been going to sleep hungry. She blames the ineffective government and exploitative sellers. Were the food sellers marking up prices? Probably. Since the 22nd, she has been recruiting women, primarily from the marketplace and factories in Richmond, but in her free time, she walks to the countryside to bring in poor farmers and kids, all that are left. She plans
a meeting of the women in relation to the high prices.
For the 1st of April, 300 show up in the Baptist church to hear Jackson's plan.
The object of the meeting was to organize to demand goods of the merchants at government prices, and if they were not given, the stores were to be broken open and the goods taken by force.
Jackson's attendees want blood, but Mary as organizer instructs them to bring weapons, yes, not create a scene, and demand to speak with Governor Letcher and to demand government prices at the market. Let's speak of Letcher. The best that can be said of him is nothing. He has the backbone of a snake and changes positions like a chameleon. He one time pushed for gradual abolition before becoming a staunch pro-slavery advocate. He is running for election to the Confederate Congress, but isn't likely to win. Back to Jackson. If their demands aren't met, they will break into the shops for food and resort to violence. On the morning of the 2nd, Mary walked to the market with a bowie knife and nothing to sell. She talks to the woman in the market when she engaged in a conversation with a police officer while brandishing her knife.
Better keep out of the streets for today, for the women intend to shoot down every man who did not aid them in taking goods.
The police officer laughs at her. She then spoke to merchant clerks and was continued to be considered a joke. A man overheard her. He had a pistol. He knew that she threatened violence on all who wouldn't help her. She asked for his pistol, and he gave it over, either out of fear or because it appears no one takes her seriously. She assembled with her mob and marched to the governor's mansion at 8 a.m. 2 accounts are given for what's next. Either Letcher answered the knock on his door and denied her request for food, or Jackson bursted into the mansion, met with an aide, Colonel S. Bassett French, who she told,
"We want bread, and bread we will have, or die."
Both ended with denial, and the riot began. Governor Letcher went out and threatened the woman in a speech. "Great job with getting those votes, Letcher." The mayor of Richmond, Joseph Mayo, read the Riot Act of 713 all the way back from Parliament. It allowed for anyone who moves to disperse a mob protection in the case of injury or killing. This also didn't work, and instead of deputizing the men to stop the mob, it brought them to Jackson's cause. The mob marched to 9th Street, the Market Square, and systematically broke the windows. Held up the owners and relieved them of their goods. One woman reaches through a broken window and has 4 fingers cut off. But besides that, it's bloodless, but violent. Mary returned home for another knife, while those back to the market took tens of thousands of dollars worth of food. It goes beyond food. Mary targets a shoe store, which was inflating prices. President Jefferson Davis learns of the riot and tries desperately to end it peacefully, while also asking Letcher to call the militia in. He goes out to the woman and speaks to them.
"You say you are hungry and have no money? Here, this is all I have.
He throws all the money he has from his pockets and pleads with them. But they don't want his pocket change, they want affordable food and a standard of living. They continue their riot until men with muskets surround them. Fletcher and the government don't want bloodshed, so they just disperse the crowd. But there's then a mad rush to arrest those responsible and bring back their goods once their defensive square is broken. It's partially successful, with many of the loot being kept by the takers. Jackson is one of those captured. She was spotted with her bowie knife, and the slander of her begins immediately. Apparently, she was yelling bread or blood, and speculated in beef, and murdered people. It was noon and she was attempting to keep the riot growing. Her trial will happen in months. Then there is Sickles. He is preparing for the arrival of Lincoln. He is tightening up the lines, having the men clean themselves and their uniforms, overlooking the tent preparation in person. He wants everything done perfectly. That's where the week ends. With the military, nothing much happening. But let's look at economics. The Confederacy has an inflation rate of 42%. The price index has gone from 100 to around 1,000. Debt makes up 20% of expenditures, with only 10% going to the civilian, Navy, and government expenditures. That is all to say the economy of the Confederacy is terrible. The blockade, as I've said before, stretching their supply lines thin. While many might look at the state of the armies and see the disaster unfolding, it's important to look at the civilians, and you can really see the difference. The Union isn't facing this starvation, this food riot. Its citizens aren't happy, but they are about as healthy as they were at the start of the war. The Confederacy isn't a nation, it's a military, and next week it might not even be that. Hello, it's the entire Civil War Week by Week team here. These are trying times of our lives. I'm sure everyone who's watching has heard about the Russian invasion of Ukraine. I just want everyone to know that I plan on donating my 2 months, March and April, to a Ukrainian charity to help support the civilians during this trying time. I'd like to thank every single one of my patrons, allowing me to make even a small difference. I hope everyone stays safe during these, again, trying times. Thank you, and I will see you next week.